Hey guys, tonight we slip into a time when cloth is not just cloth, but treasure. When the shimmer of a garment can make or break alliances, and when the sound of looms clicking in the royal capital is the heartbeat of an empire. You step into the Malian capital of Niani, where the air is thick with dust, spice, and the faint metallic tang of gold dust being sifted through careful fingers. Silk is not native to this land. You can't just wander outside and pluck cocoons off mulberry trees. Yet here it is, gleaming in the torchlight, shimmering across the shoulders of kings. And here's your gentle reality check. If you showed up in Niani back then wearing your modern polyester hoodie, you'd be laughed out of the market, or worse, sold to the caravan masters. You probably wouldn't survive this little fashion faux pas. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening right now, tell me where you are in the world and what time it is for you. I love knowing who's drifting off with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push through the streets of Niani, and the first thing you notice isn't gold, isn't ivory, isn't the chatter of merchants, it's the sound of looms, wooden frames thumping rhythmically, a percussive lullaby echoing from courtyards and open huts. Weaving here isn't just industry, it's status, identity, a way to wrap yourself in power. Men and women lean over frames, their hands moving in a blur, pulling bright imported threads into patterned cloth that seems to ripple like water. You imagine touching one bolt of fabric, and immediately your fingertips tingle with that smooth, almost slippery texture silk has, the kind of touch that whispers, "You don't belong in rags." The royal palace itself is draped in this shimmering miracle. Curtains of patterned silk sway in the hot air. Mansa Musa, yes, the same ruler who once gave away so much gold in Cairo that the value of gold itself collapsed, sat on cushions embroidered with silk threads. His robe glowed with imported silk woven into local cotton, a hybrid fashion flex that screamed, "I am wealthy enough to own the world's finest imports, and creative enough to make them my own." One mainstream historical fact here, we know from Arabic travelers like Ibn Battuta that Mali's kings and elites adored imported textiles and often mixed them with local patterns, making unique blends of African artistry and foreign luxury. The looms themselves look deceptively simple, just wood beams lashed together with rope, sticks acting as pedals, a shuttle flying back and forth. But don't let the rustic design fool you. This is high-tech engineering for its time. Each loom hums like a heartbeat, weaving not only fabric but stories of trade and ambition. Weavers guard their techniques jealously. Children peek over shoulders, learning by watching because secrets aren't written down. You want in? You marry into a weaving family, or you never learn. Kind of like trying to break into someone's Netflix password. Good luck without blood ties. Quirky tidbit. Some oral traditions claim that the first weavers in the region were taught by spirits who lived by the rivers, water beings who demanded offerings in return for the gift of cloth. So, every now and then, a weaver would toss cola nuts or a splash of palm wine into the river before starting a big project. Was it superstition, or just a good excuse to sip some wine while working? Hard to say, but you picture the water rippling as if nodding in approval. The atmosphere of Niani is layered with contradictions. On one corner, children chase goats, laughter echoing. On another, guards polish spears tipped with iron, eyes scanning for danger. And weaving in the midst of it all, silk that has traveled thousands of miles, reshaped here into symbols of authority. The scent of indigo dye wafts through alleys, staining hands deep blue, Historians still argue whether Mali imported mostly raw silk or finished cloth, but the evidence suggests both, depending on the season and political alliances. Either way, the demand was insatiable. As you step closer to a loom, the weaver glances at you. His fingers blur, pulling threads taut, creating a pattern so precise it looks printed. He chuckles softly, maybe at your gawking expression, and says something you can't understand. But you catch the meaning. Weaving is life here. Every line in the cloth is like a line of poetry. Every shimmer a promise that wealth and power still flow through Mali's veins. You pass into the palace courtyard, where bolts of finished fabric lie stacked like bricks of color. Servants unroll them for inspection. Gold-threaded borders, geometric shapes, flowing lines that seem almost alive. Nobles hover, choosing which cloth to claim, while scribes record transactions. One noblewoman runs her hand along a shimmering bolt, then pulls it against her cheek, closing her eyes. The cloth is soft, cool, whispering secrets only her skin can hear. Here's the thing. Silk in Niani is more than just a fashion statement. It's a political language. To give someone silk is to say, I acknowledge your importance. To wear silk is to shout, I command respect. Refusing to wear silk when it's offered, well, that's the medieval equivalent of leaving someone's text on read. It can spark feuds, or worse, diplomatic breakdowns. Now imagine being a young apprentice. You've been allowed to carry spools of thread from the storage room. Each spool glows faintly in the firelight, precious as coin. You walk carefully, heart pounding, knowing one slip, one tumble into the dust, and you've ruined weeks of caravan travel. Silk is that valuable, lighter than gold, but traded almost the same way. By evening the city cools. Drums echo from distant courtyards. The scent of grilled millet cakes drifts through the air and looms slow to a stop. The last weaver stretches, cracks his back, and covers the loom with cloth to protect it from dust. The threads seem to shimmer even in darkness, like stars captured and woven into earthly form. You look back one last time before leaving the royal heart of Niani. The looms hum in your memory, their rhythm like a lullaby. You realize this empire doesn't just sit on gold. It's wrapped in shimmering silk, stitched together by human hands, humming through the night. And as the torches flicker and fade, you find yourself drifting, almost hypnotized, into the dreamlike shimmer of threads that refuse to end. You wake into the dawn light of the savannah, a soft glow spreading across red earth and the grasslands that stretch forever. The capital feels distant now as you follow the faint outline of hoofprints leading north, away from the comfort of palaces and into the long breath of desert winds. Because the truth is, silk does not simply appear in Mali by magic or by helpful river spirits sneaking into looms at night. It must be carried, loaded onto camels, trekked across landscapes so harsh you start questioning all of your life choices. A soft bed suddenly sounds much nicer than trudging alongside a caravan where your feet are blistering after 5 minutes. But this is the road silk takes, and you're here now too. Picture it. Endless lines of camels, long necks swaying like ships on a rolling ocean of sand. Bells jingle softly from their harnesses, and packs of goods bulge across their backs. Blocks of salt as heavy as boulders, sacks of spices so fragrant they announce themselves from 100 paces, and hidden deep inside bundles of silk. The threads may have started in faraway lands, possibly from mulberry-fed silkworms in China, or from Persian workshops already humming for centuries. Somehow, they find their way onto the backs of these desert ships. Mainstream historical fact here. Silk from Asia traveled westward across multiple hands before reaching Mali, passing through Islamic trade hubs like Cairo and Tunis, before drifting into the Saharan routes that connected to Timbuktu and beyond. The desert isn't kind. You squint into waves of heat, lips drying in the hot wind. Traders sing to their camels old rhythmic chants that keep the animals steady. You hear one joke in the group. A man mutters that if his camel ever learns just how valuable that cloth on its back really is, it'll demand a salary raise. Everyone laughs, and the sound carries thin and brittle over the dunes. There's your first desert joke. Camels as union workers demanding hazard pay. Quirky tidbit. Some travelers swore that silk thread could be used to stitch wounds, claiming the fiber was strong enough and smooth enough to heal faster. Imagine that. Out here, someone slices their hand on a salt block, and the healer reaches into the caravan goods, plucks a shiny thread, and sews you back together with what would normally end up on a king's robe. Was it medical genius or just a weird flex? Hard to tell. Every night, fires bloom like little stars scattered on the sand. The caravan huddles close, trading stories. You hear talk of distant lands. In China, they say, silkworms are guarded by law. Stealing one is punishable by death. Someone adds, and in Persia, they weave patterns so fine they look like moving water. Then the voices drop, reverent as they speak of Mali's appetite for these threads, how kings trade gold dust by the handful for a bolt of shimmering fabric. As the days drag, you sense the weight of history pressing. Historians still argue whether Mali imported mostly raw silk to weave themselves or finished cloth to display immediately. Some evidence suggests that nobles preferred both, one for creativity and one for instant prestige. It doesn't matter much to you in this caravan. What matters is keeping the cloth safe. A sudden gust of wind stings your eyes, and for a second you swear you see patterns in the sand, stripes and swirls like woven cloth rippling across the dunes. Maybe the desert itself is mocking your journey, reminding you that its fabric is endless, and human weaving will always be fragile in comparison. Days turn into weeks. Salt from Taoudeni is traded in towns along the way, spices exchanged, and always the silks guarded most carefully. You notice that traders carry them not at the top of the pack, but buried, wrapped in layers of plain cloth to fool wandering bandits. From a distance it looks like just another sack of millet. Up close it's treasure. The caravan finally reaches an oasis. Palms sway, water glimmers, and everyone rushes to drink, splash, collapse in the shade. You run your fingers through the pool and watch the reflection of camels bending to drink. A boy beside you pulls a small bolt of silk from his pack, just enough to shine in the light. He whispers, "This was made in lands where rivers sing." His eyes are wide, dreamy. He rolls the silk back up before anyone sees. You realize even the poorest boy in the caravan carries stories woven into these threads, believing them almost alive. By the time the caravan nears Timbuktu, you feel every bone ache. But then the smell of cooked meat wafts across the air, mixed with voices calling, drums beating faintly in celebration. The walls of the city rise, built of mud brick but gleaming like fortresses of learning and trade. You followed the path silk takes, from ghostly mirages in the desert to the hands of scholars and kings waiting inside those walls. Before stepping through the gates, you glance back. The desert seems endless, swallowing the horizon. Somewhere out there, more caravans are inching forward. More silks shimmering unseen. More traders betting their lives that cloth can be more valuable than water. And in your ears the jingling bells of camels still echo. reminding you that the journey of silk is not just about fashion, it's about endurance, survival, and the strange human urge to carry beauty through the harshest landscapes on Earth. By the time you weave your way deeper into Timbuktu's back alleys, the desert dust has settled in your clothes, your skin, even your eyelashes. But the sound here is different from the open expanse of dunes and camel bells. It's sharper, more intimate. The snick of knives slicing thread, the quiet squeak of wooden pegs turning, the rhythmic click-clack of looms tucked inside courtyards. You're no longer following caravans now. You're inside the hidden heart of silk weaving itself, the place where secrets are guarded tighter than gold mines, where every thread is a password and every pattern a family signature. You step into a shaded courtyard where 3 looms sit like silent beasts waiting to be woken. The weavers here are all men, bare-chested in the heat, their fingers calloused and stained with dye. Children hover at the edges, not allowed to touch, just to watch, memorize, and dream. In Mali, weaving is more than craft. It's lineage. Guilds of weavers pass their knowledge only through bloodlines. If you're not born into it, good luck. It's the medieval version of a members-only Discord server. Closed invite. No outside screenshots. One man begins to work, his shuttle darting back and forth, faster than your eyes can follow. He dips his fingers in a small pot of water every few strokes to keep the silk smooth, the thread tightening with a sound like a plucked harp string. You lean closer, almost hypnotized, as the pattern emerges. Geometric diamonds ripple across the fabric, a design older than memory. This is not just decoration, it's identity coded into cloth. One mainstream historical fact: across West Africa, textile guilds often used specific motifs as a kind of signature, making cloth a marker of community, status, and even politics. The air is thick with the tang of dye vats. One pot steams with indigo so rich it stains the very air. Another glows with the orange warmth of saffron. And in a corner, an apprentice grinds dried leaves into a fine powder, probably from African trees like kola or from imported sources, to produce new shades. You realize every scrap of the natural world is fair game. Bark, roots, soil, even insect shells. If it stains skin, it'll probably stain silk. Quirky tidbit: some recipes for red dye involved crushing thousands of tiny beetles, cochineal-like insects, into a thick paste. Imagine explaining to your spouse, "Honey, I'll be late for dinner. I'm still smashing bugs for fashion." The most closely guarded secrets, though, are in the finishing. One weaver leans over his work, whispering under his breath. Is he praying, chanting, or just muttering at a stubborn thread? No one will tell you. But you've heard rumors. Some say weavers spit on their cloth at precise moments, believing their saliva seals the dye's power. Others claim certain knots are tied only during a full moon, aligning pattern with the rhythm of the heavens. Historians still argue whether these were genuine techniques or symbolic rituals, but the mystery only deepens the aura around the craft. You shuffle past a second workshop. This one is smaller, darker, and the looms here hum with a different rhythm. The master here specializes in double weave, 2 layers of cloth interlaced so patterns shimmer differently depending on the light. You tilt your head and watch the fabric change before your eyes. Stripes bending into diamonds, diamonds melting into waves. It feels like optical illusion centuries before anyone invented Photoshop. A boy beside you grins and whispers that this technique is only taught to the most trusted apprentices, because if outsiders learned, they could sell it for fortunes. Suddenly you understand, secrecy here is survival. Knowledge is worth as much as the silk itself. A moment of comic relief. You notice one apprentice dipping his hands into the indigo vat, pulling them out stained deep blue. He smirks, waves at you with smurf-colored palms, and says something that probably translates to, "Guess who's doing dishes tonight?" The other boys burst into laughter. Even in a place filled with sacred tradition, kids still find ways to make jokes out of chores. Night falls, but the workshops don't sleep. Oil lamps flicker, shadows bend across the courtyard walls, and the looms keep singing. You close your eyes and let the rhythm sink in. Click, swoosh, thump. It's steady, hypnotic, like the heartbeat of a city spinning its wealth one thread at a time. The air grows warmer, heavy with dye fumes. Somewhere outside, a donkey brays, and the weavers chuckle as if the animal is jealous of the music of the loom. Here you realize every thread is a kind of magic spell. It ties together trade routes, kings, families, and hidden rituals. And you? You're the outsider standing in the corner, watching, straining to catch even one secret, knowing they'll never truly let you in. The looms will stop one day. The patterns may fade, but the knowledge, passed hand to hand, whispered in courtyards, will never spill easily. The fabric is more than cloth. It is the woven memory of the empire itself. The morning sun slips across Timbuktu, and the city begins to glow not from torches or looms, but from the very fabrics themselves. You wander through the narrow lanes, past mud brick walls painted with the day's first light. And it strikes you. This empire doesn't just wear silk. It wears meaning, because in Mali, color isn't decoration. Color is power. Color is the difference between a scholar and a servant, between a noble's daughter and a market trader. You tug at your own plain shirt and realize, once again, you'd be the medieval equivalent of a fashion dropout. The first thing that catches your eye is indigo. Deep, endless, a shade that seems to swallow the very idea of daylight. Indigo isn't just a dye, it's an entire economy here. People call it blue gold, and you can see why. Every noble, every scholar with status, wants to drape themselves in its dark mystery. Mainstream historical fact. Indigo dyeing was a cornerstone of West African textile production, and its prestige traveled far along trade routes. The deep blue shades were not just aesthetic, but also carried symbolic associations with wisdom, wealth, and spiritual authority. You watch as a woman pulls a silk scarf from a vat of indigo, and for a moment it looks green, almost disappointing. Then in the air, magic happens. The fabric shifts, breathes, and slowly blooms into blue so rich it feels alive. She smiles knowingly at your wide eyes, as if to say, yes, even you can be fooled by cloth. And then there's saffron, thread soaked in golden fire. Not cheap, not easy. Imported from faraway lands, saffron dye is rarer, more delicate. When woven into silk, the result is a shimmer that looks like sunlight trapped in cloth. Only the wealthiest dare wear it, because to be seen glowing like the sun is to claim you belong among gods. Quirky tidbit. Some storytellers swore that wearing too much saffron-dyed silk could make you irresistible, not just to admirers but to mosquitoes. So picture an emperor glowing in golden robes, swatting furiously at bugs while trying to look regal. Of course, gold thread itself takes prestige to the next level. Thin filaments of hammered gold are twisted into silk and woven into patterns that catch every sliver of light. You lean close and see them sparkle like stars embedded in fabric. No wonder nobles parade in these garments. They're walking constellations, every fold a reminder that wealth here doesn't just jingle in purses but shines on bodies. Historians still argue whether Mali imported most of these gold thread fabrics ready-made from North Africa, or whether local artisans managed to work actual gold into thread themselves. Either way, the shimmer is undeniable. The symbolism of colors goes beyond beauty. Blue speaks of depth and dignity. Yellow, whether saffron or gold, radiates authority and divine blessing. Red from crushed insects or rare roots carries the heat of battle, passion, and sacrifice. Even the combinations matter. You pass a young nobleman wearing a robe striped in red and gold. The people around him bow slightly, acknowledging his status without a word. Color here is language, and everyone is fluent. At the edge of the market, you stumble across a scene equal parts ritual and practical. A scholar sits cross-legged, his robes a patchwork of faded blue silk. He's explaining to students how certain colors protect the soul. Blue shields against envy, red wards off illness, gold invites divine favor. He speaks softly, almost as if the words themselves are prayers woven into the threads. You wonder whether it's true or just poetic teaching. Either way, the students hang on his every word, but not everyone agrees. Down the lane, a merchant grumbles that all this symbolism is nonsense. Cloth is cloth, he insists, slapping a bolt of plain cotton. It sells if it's strong. Who cares if it's blue or yellow? His neighbor laughs and retorts, "Tell that to the Sultan when you deliver him beige robes." You can imagine how well that would go. Royalty opening a gift of plain tan cloth, sighing like a kid who just got socks for their birthday. Even children understand the stakes. Two boys wrestle in the dust, both clutching scraps of dyed silk, one deep blue, one fiery red. To them, it isn't just cloth, it's a sword and shield, a crown and cape, a way to pretend they're kings in miniature. They leap and shout, and their laughter rings across the street. You realize, in a way, they're not wrong. For Mali, cloth is as mighty as weapons. As dusk rolls in, the marketplace becomes a living tapestry. Lanterns flicker, catching on robes of every shade. Nobles stride in glowing gold. Scholars glide in endless blue. Merchants flaunt red sashes knotted proudly at their waists. The city itself is a woven rainbow, each color declaring allegiance, faith, wealth, or ambition. You pause at the edge of the crowd and close your eyes. The air smells of indigo vats, roasted millet cakes, saffron-infused stews simmering nearby. The hum of voices blends with the rustle of cloth, and you feel the weight of it all. Color here is not choice, not decoration. It is a declaration of who you are, and perhaps who you want to become. When you open your eyes, you see a robe unlike the others. Silk of deep midnight blue, streaked with threads of gold so fine they look like lightning frozen in fabric. The man wearing it walks slowly, shoulders squared, every head turning as he passes. In that moment you understand. This is not just fashion. This is the shimmer of empire, the glow of prestige woven so tightly into daily life that without it, Mali would not shine half as brightly. By now you've drifted deeper into Timbuktu's veins, where the hum of scholarship and prayer from the mosques blends with something less lofty, the chatter of buyers and sellers. You find yourself standing in the marketplace, the heart of trade, where silk is no longer just shimmering in palaces or guarded in secret courtyards. Here, it's alive, bargaining, unfurling like sails in the hot wind. You smell dust, sweat, roasted nuts, and the faint perfume of cloves, and underneath it all that sharp tang of indigo dye clinging to fabric and fingers alike. You're not just a visitor now. You're jostled by elbows, brushed by fabric, your ears stuffed with the noise of 10 different deals being shouted at once. Merchants squat on mats surrounded by bolts of cloth, some still smelling of sea journeys, others freshly woven in local workshops. Women laugh as they test scarves by pulling them against their skin. Traders from the desert arrive with packs still warm from camelbacks, untying bundles to reveal silks that glimmer even in the shadow of awnings. Mainstream historical fact: Timbuktu and Gao were major trading hubs of the Malian Empire, with markets that linked West Africa to North Africa and the wider Mediterranean world. Goods exchanged here included salt, gold, ivory, books, and of course, silk. And like all high-value items, silk was measured not just by length, but sometimes by weight, its value compared directly to salt and gold, the empire's most famous commodities. You shuffle closer to a group haggling fiercely over a bolt of Persian silk. One merchant insists it should fetch the price of a donkey plus 2 baskets of salt. The buyer scoffs, claiming the weave is flawed, pointing out a single knot out of place as though that imperfection justifies shaving a week's worth of caravan work from the price. The tension builds until finally they burst into laughter, slap hands, and settle on a compromise. It's not so much business as theater. Quirky tidbit: travelers recorded that in some Saharan markets, fabric wasn't always exchanged with coins or even gold dust, but by slabs of salt cut from mines like Taoudani. Salt was so precious here, sometimes worth more than gold by weight, that silk sellers gladly accepted it as payment. Imagine walking into a modern luxury boutique and plunking down a giant salt brick to buy a designer scarf. You'd probably get kicked out or go viral on TikTok. Everywhere you look, the marketplace is a festival of cloth. Stalls hang with fabric like waterfalls of color, red so bright they stab your eyes, blues so deep you feel you're drowning, yellows glowing like trapped sunshine. Children chase each other through the maze of silk bolts, vanishing into waves of fabric, their laughter muffled by the cloth. Donkeys bray, hawkers shout, drummers pound a beat, and through it all, silk shimmers quietly, waiting to be chosen, folded, carried away like treasure. Historians still argue whether these bustling markets sold more raw silk than finished textiles. Some suggest Mali's appetite leaned heavily toward raw material, feeding its own guild weavers. Others point to records of imported finished cloth flooding the markets, dazzling buyers with exotic patterns that local looms couldn't yet mimic. You stand in the middle watching, and honestly, it feels like both are true. Bolts of raw thread glint in the sun, while finished robes ripple proudly on hangers, drawing hands like magnets. A sudden commotion breaks the steady hum. A noblewoman arrives, her entourage clearing space. She pauses at one stall, lifts a scarf woven with thin golden filaments, and inspects it with a slow, deliberate care. The vendor holds his breath, sweating visibly in the heat. After a long silence, she nods once, drops a pouch of gold dust into his hands, and sweeps away. The vendor lets out a laugh of relief, clutching the pouch like his heart. Moments later, he's surrounded by neighbors, teasing him that he should treat everyone to a feast. He mutters back something that probably translates as, "With this money, I'll buy myself more silk before I buy you dinner." Even scholars enter the mix. You pass a group of students from Sankore University haggling over second-hand silks, their robes patched and worn. They argue about which cloth will make them look more serious during lectures. One insists indigo robes show wisdom, another claims red inspires confidence. In the end, they split the difference and buy both, joking they'll rotate colors depending on which professor they need to impress. You smile, some things never change. Even in a city of scholars, fashion politics rule. As the day wanes, you notice how the market transforms. The shouting softens, merchants pack up, and fabrics are folded back into neat bundles. But in the fading light, silk takes on a new kind of glow. No longer blinding under the sun, the threads shimmer gently, almost like embers in a fire. Buyers linger, still running their hands along the fabric as though reluctant to let go of that feeling of luxury. Then, just as you're about to leave, you spot a small scene that sticks with you. A child tugs at her mother's sleeve, pointing to a tiny scrap of silk, a leftover piece no bigger than a handkerchief.
The mother hesitates, counts her coins, and buys it.
The girl wraps it around her wrist, grinning as if she's just been crowned empress of the world. It reminds you that while silk may be the language of nobles and scholars, its shimmer belongs to anyone who dares to dream. You step out of the marketplace as night settles, ears still ringing with the bargaining cries, eyes dazzled by the river of color. Behind you the city quiets, but you know that tomorrow and every day after, silk will return to the stalls, shimmering like sunlight trapped in thread, binding together salt, gold, and human ambition in the tapestry of Mali's markets. You keep moving, feet shuffling over smooth-packed earth as the scene changes again. The air now carrying not only the scent of food stalls and spices, but something richer, like parchment ink, dusted leather, and rolled textiles tucked beneath the arms of proud messengers. This is no ordinary market or workshop. This is the world where silk shifts into a new role, where threads no longer just clothe kings or lure merchants, but begin to glide quietly into the realm of politics, scholarship, and long-distance diplomacy. You can almost hear the subtle hum of ambition in the air, and whether you like it or not, you've now wandered into the political fabric of the Malian Empire. And you probably won't survive trying to negotiate here, unless you've got a solid gift of silk folded neatly under your arm. Diplomatic history loves to talk about gold when it comes to Mali, how envoys carried nuggets the size of goose eggs to Cairo, how kings made entire economies quake with their generosity. But silk, that was the quieter player, the elegant counterpart to all that heavy metal wealth. When embassies traveled to North Africa, or when scholars rode in from Granada, Morocco, or even further east, they often received fine Malian cloth in return for their books, their knowledge, or their allegiance. One mainstream fact stands tall here. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage to Mecca in 1324 is remembered for gold-drenched generosity. But contemporary accounts also note the presence of rich textiles. Yes, including silks, that dazzled Cairo and Medina. It wasn't just coins falling into hands. It was bolts of luminous cloth laid out like treasures in their own right. Picture yourself stepping into a courtyard where scribes kneel over ink pots, while nearby envoys unwrap long rolls of patterned silk. The fabric catches the sunlight, shimmering like water. The message is clear without a single word. Mali is wealthy. Mali is cultured. Mali has taste. And you, sitting there rubbing your eyes sleepily in this story, can't deny it. Silk is as persuasive as a well-argued treaty. You'd probably cave after just one look at those golden threads. Of course, not every exchange was about politics at the high table. Scholars arriving in Timbuktu, already exhausted from the long ride over desert dunes, often found themselves honored with gifts of cloth, some of which were lined with imported silk threads. Imagine being a tired jurist or astronomer and suddenly being wrapped in shimmering fabric. That was both payment and flattery, a way of saying, teach here, live here, write here. Mali values your words as much as your presence. In some cases, scholars left their works bound in silk or wrapped in cloth as they moved on, scattering little traces of Malian textile pride across the Islamic world. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. In some oral traditions, the gifts of silk were believed to carry protective blessings. Some say the fabric shielded scholars against envy or misfortune, almost like a charm. You know, the kind of belief where if you lose your notebook of legal commentary, you can just blame it on not wearing your silk-wrapped robe that day. It sounds funny, but deep down you'd probably take the robe too, because hey, even imaginary protection is better than none when your enemies might be hiding in the sand dunes. Historians still argue whether these silk gifts came predominantly from imported raw threads woven locally, or whether Mali relied heavily on fully finished bolts brought in by caravans. Was Mali innovating its own hybrid style, or simply distributing the finest goods from elsewhere? The debates stretch like fabric across centuries, each scholar tugging at the threads from a different end. You just sit here, nodding along, wondering why people can't just accept that both things can be true at once. Sometimes you weave, sometimes you buy, and sometimes you just pretend you did the hard work yourself. Silk also glided into marriage alliances. When noble families tied themselves together, bolts of fabric often went along with the bride. Imagine a wedding chest, ivory bracelets, gold coins, and then that one roll of shimmering silk that makes everyone gasp. Your eyes wander to it immediately, because let's be honest, no amount of goat dowries can compete with cloth that looks like bottled moonlight. These fabrics signaled prestige, connection, and sometimes a little political maneuvering, because nothing says, "Don't raid our cattle herds," quite like gifting your neighbor's son-in-law a silk robe. And then there were the foreign courts. Mali's emissaries sometimes appeared in Morocco, Cairo, or Andalusia, carrying gifts that combined gold and silk. One description tells of fabric so fine it looked translucent, a pattern you could only see when the sun shone through. This wasn't just clothing, it was a flex, a diplomatic nudge. See what we've got? Imagine what more we could share if you play nice. In your sleepy second-person stroll through history, you realize that these bolts of cloth weren't just gifts. They were carefully chosen bargaining chips. Now, in true Malian fashion, sometimes the silk was repurposed. Scholars say that when envoys were slow to pay tribute or wanted to delay negotiations, a symbolic piece of fabric could be held hostage, folded away, uncut, until the deal was struck. It's like the medieval equivalent of putting a gift card on the table, but refusing to scratch off the code until your friend finally pays you back for pizza. A little petty? Sure. Effective? Absolutely. By now you're drifting through rooms lined with scrolls, fabric folded in chests, voices echoing in Arabic and Songhai, and the soft clink of coins mixing with the rustle of silk. You notice how these threads are never idle. They're always moving, binding scholars, kings, merchants, and brides into a web thicker than any spider's. And all the while, you're half tempted to grab a robe for yourself, because if you're going to wander through history sleepless, you might as well look fabulous doing it. The laughter of students drifts through the corridors of Timbuktu's libraries, the faint sound of arguments over theology, the shuffle of pages and cloth. Somewhere in the distance, you swear you hear an envoy haggling with a local scribe. 3 books for this roll of silk? And the scribe responds with a smirk. 4 books and you've got a deal. The deal-making never ends, and the fabric keeps weaving itself into the story. You rub your eyes, yawning, but the shimmering glow of those gifts hasn't dimmed yet. Not in the halls of learning, not in the grand marriage feasts, not in the long roads stretching toward foreign courts. Each fold of silk whispers something, alliances, loyalties, secrets that even the sharpest historians can't quite unravel. You shuffle along again, maybe a little unsteady now, like someone trying to sneak through a dream that keeps shifting. The silk still clings to your thoughts, but the atmosphere around you has changed. The air feels thicker, the whispers closer, like the fabric itself is alive with stories too strange to be listed neatly in any ledger. This is where rumor and magic seep into the threads. You didn't just stumble into trade routes and embassies anymore. You've wandered into the realm of legends, those late-night tales muttered by firelight, where silk becomes more than just cloth. And honestly, if you're expecting everything to make sense here, you probably won't survive the contradictions. Picture yourself at a fireside in a Malian village, the stars stretching overhead like scattered jewels. Someone passes you a calabash of cool water, another leans in, voice low, and begins telling of a warrior who returned from battle untouched by arrows, wrapped in a shimmering robe of silk. They swear the cloth turned blades away, as if each thread carried a guardian spirit. Mainstream fact first. We do know that across West Africa, textiles weren't just fashion. They often carried spiritual symbolism. Priests and healers sometimes wrapped themselves in certain cloths during rituals, believing color and texture held power. So in Mali, where silk shimmered like liquid light, it's no leap to imagine warriors and rulers wearing it as protection, both practical and mystical. But here's the quirky tidbit. Oral tales say that some silk garments were woven with charms hidden in their threads, tiny amulets, beads, even hair strands from loved ones worked secretly into the fabric. You can picture a weaver leaning close to the loom, muttering something halfway between prayer and spell, knotting it in like a secret code. Imagine getting a robe and later finding a bead tucked in its lining. Creepy? Maybe. Comforting? Possibly. You'd probably convince yourself it worked, even if your enemy's arrow missed you by a mile simply because he had bad aim. Historians still argue whether these tales are symbolic exaggerations or whether some families genuinely passed down weaving techniques with embedded charms. Did people believe in the cloth's magic because of its rarity and beauty? Or were there hidden practices lost in translation across centuries? It's the kind of scholarly debate where the line between material culture and myth blurs like watercolors bleeding on silk. And you, sitting in the middle of it, probably wouldn't risk choosing a side. Then there were the stories of silk as a lure for love, whispered like half-giggles in the market, where a silk scarf dyed deep indigo, and the one you desire will follow you home without a second thought. It's like a medieval dating app, except the swipes are fabric folds. Some even claim that couples wrapped together in silk on their wedding night would be bound for life. Though, let's be real, that's probably just as effective as saying matching pajamas mean eternal love. Still, the thought of silk as Cupid's fabric lingers in these tales, silky threads tugging at hearts as well as eyes, and of course, no enchanted textile lore is complete without a darker edge. In some regions, people muttered warnings. Never cut a gifted silk robe in half. It was believed to invite misfortune, a curse sewn into every severed seam. You'd better believe you're sitting there thinking twice before trimming your imaginary sleeves shorter. One tale even tells of a rival chief who, jealous of another's shimmering garment, ordered it cut to pieces and distributed to his warriors. Not long after, drought struck his lands, and people whispered it was the silk's revenge. Logical? Not really. Dramatic? Absolutely. Another legend drifting through the air speaks of night silks, robes so fine they looked dark until the moonlight struck them, revealing patterns no one could see in the day. Some claimed these robes could let the wearer slip through shadows unseen. Spies in silk, that's a bold image. Historians? They'll shrug and mutter something about poetic exaggeration, but your mind half tired and drifting, is already picturing some poor guard squinting into the night, while a silky shadow strolls right past. Then there are the rumors of cursed shipments. Caravan leaders supposedly told tales of bolts of silk that vanished overnight, as if the desert swallowed them whole. One theory says bandits made off with them. Another says sandstorms buried them. But the rumor that lingers in your ear is this: the fabric refused to belong to the greedy, so it simply dissolved into the dunes. You can roll your eyes at that, or you can admit the desert has its own way of keeping secrets. Even in Timbuktu's scholarly circles, the line between textile fact and textile fable blurred. A scholar might wrap his Quran in silk, murmuring that it kept the pages safe not only from sand, but from corruption of the soul. Another might laugh, claiming no fabric could do that, but still borrow a silk wrapper the next day just in case. You can't help but notice how even skeptics, when pressed, reached for the shimmer. After all, if you're going to argue all night, why not argue draped in something fabulous? As you drift further, the stories stack on top of each other. Silk shielding warriors, silk binding lovers, silk whispering blessings, silk cursing fools. The threads twist around you, tugging at reason and wonder in equal measure. And through it all, one thing becomes clear. You may never sort out truth from tale, and maybe that's the point. Some fabrics are woven not only with dyes and threads, but with belief itself. The fire before you crackles lower, the night stretching wider. You lean back, eyes heavy, still caught in the glimmer of those impossible stories. Whether you believe them or not, the legends wrap around you like a second robe, one you can't quite take off. Maybe you don't want to. You shuffle forward one last time, though your steps feel slower now, like the weight of all those stories, rumors, and shimmering threads has settled into your shoulders. The air feels different here, less crowded, less humming with deals and legends. It's quieter, almost melancholy, as though the looms themselves have fallen still. What you're walking through now is the dimming glow of Mali's Silk Age, the part where history exhales and lets the shine slip gently into the past. At its height, silk was a badge of Mali's reach. Threads from Asia carried across the Sahara, transformed by Malian hands, then gifted to scholars, kings, and brides. But no empire holds on to every shimmer forever. Trade routes shift, politics tilt, and fashions change faster than you'd expect when you're working with cloth that takes months to weave. The first mainstream fact here is straightforward. By the 15th century, Mali was losing control of many of its lucrative trans-Saharan routes, as neighboring powers like the Songhai Empire rose and took over. Gold, salt, and yes, silk caravans began to find new hands to deal with. Imagine watching your favorite market stall close down. But instead of just losing your coffee vendor, you lose your empire's prestige one bolt of cloth at a time. In those fading days, you can picture looms still clicking in workshops, but the demand shrinking, the buyers fewer. The old confidence of Mali is the center of the world softening into uneasy silence. Quirky tidbit? Some oral histories say people still tried to cling to silk's glow by re-dyeing older cloth to make it look new, passing robes from generation to generation until the threads were more patchwork than luxury. A nobleman in fading days might strut in robes his grandfather wore, the fabric whispering of past grandeur even if the hems were fraying. You can almost hear someone mutter, "It's vintage," while adjusting a sleeve that looks suspiciously thin. Historians still argue whether Mali's decline in silk prominence was due more to external competition or to internal fractures. Did the caravans simply prefer new Songhai-controlled routes? Or did political instability inside Mali make the weaving guilds falter? The debate weaves on with no neat conclusion, like a knot no one can quite untangle. But either way, by the late 16th century, Timbuktu and Gao no longer dazzled the world with the same silken allure. The threads had dimmed, but the memory lingered. Even so, you can't walk away from this story feeling it just ended in dust. Those shimmering cloths didn't vanish. They endured in fragments, in oral tales, in heirlooms tucked away in wooden chests. Some families still preserved scraps of fabric as blessings or reminders of an age when Mali was luminous. You might even still stumble on one in a dusty corner of a museum, its colors faded, but its story alive. You lean close, squint at the worn threads, and you swear you hear faint echoes of looms clacking, envoys bargaining, lovers whispering beneath shimmering robes. The silk glow might have faded from Mali's politics, but its legacy remained in memory, and in the very idea that cloth could hold more than utility, that it could carry prestige, protection, and power. Even now, as you shuffle through the twilight of this tale, you realize those threads never really snapped. They just became part of the larger weave of West African history, hidden but never forgotten, and with that thought, the final shimmer seems to soften into the night, leaving you wrapped in something quieter, something slower. The glow dims, but it doesn't go out. So now, as the last echoes of looms fade, you can feel the pace of the story easing too, like footsteps slowing after a long walk. The caravans, the marketplaces, the legends, they all fold gently into silence. What remains is a soft afterimage, as if you've been staring at cloth so bright that even when you close your eyes, you still see it shimmer. You breathe slower now, letting the imagery loosen, like loosening a belt after a feast. The hum of distant markets becomes a soft murmur, then a whisper, until all that's left is the faintest trace of silk brushing past your ear. You can almost imagine it, the fabric slipping through your hands, smooth and cool, leaving nothing but comfort behind. The edges of the empire blur, its bright halls fade, its wealth disperses into the wind, but somehow the silence feels calm rather than sad. The story has wound itself down like a loom at the end of the day, its shuttle resting, its threads at peace. You let your shoulders drop, your eyelids grow heavier. The tales of warriors, lovers, scholars, and kings drift away into the distance, leaving you with only the soft rhythm of your breath, steady and sure. The empire may have dimmed, but for tonight, its memory wraps you like a gentle robe, warm and protective. And in this stillness, with no need to chase caravans or decode whispers, you can simply rest. Let the last shimmer fade. Let the threads dissolve into dream. Sleep at last is here.